My name is Morris Callahan. I'm 57 years old, and for 32 years I was a licensed electrician in Hamilton. On a Tuesday morning in March, I drove to the post office because the package slips had been piling up on my kitchen counter. There were 3 of them. I came home with 3 boxes in the back seat of my truck. I set them on the kitchen table. The tape hadn't been opened. The corners were still sharp the way they are when nothing's been touched. And across the top of each one, in red marker, not black, red, somebody had written refused, returned to sender. Under the shipping label on each box, my handwriting: Zoe, Felix, Piper. All 3 names crossed out with the same red marker, same heavy hand. I sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't open them. I already knew what was in them because I'd put them there myself. 3 weeks earlier, my son had called. He said, "Dad, I think it's better if you give us some space this year. We're trying to keep things calm for the kids." I asked him what that meant. He said, "You're not really connected to them, Dad. It's not fair to put that on them." I counted to 4 before I answered. Then I said, "All right," and I hung up. He thought that was surrender. He didn't know about the RESP accounts I'd been putting money into for 8 years. He didn't know his wife had mailed me a transfer form 2 months earlier, with a sticky note and a smiley face drawn on it. And he didn't know that my sister Phyllis, who is a chartered professional accountant in Mississauga, had been trying to reach me for a week. Before I keep going, take a second to subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I do read everyone. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Greta died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She was 50, which is the kind of number you don't expect to bury your wife under. In the last 2 weeks, when she was still well enough to sit up, she told me to open RESPs for the grandchildren. All 3 of them. Zoe was 9 then. Felix was 6. Piper was 2. I didn't know what an RESIC was. I'm an electrician. I know circuits and panel boxes and junction points. Financial instruments were Greta's department. She'd kept every receipt in this house since 1991. She handed me a piece of paper with the name of a financial advisor, and she said, "Go see this woman, do what she tells you. The grandchildren are going to need school money." I went. I did what I was told. I signed as subscriber on 3 accounts, 1 per grandchild. The federal government kicks in 20% on the first $2,500 you contribute every year. $500 free dollars per child per year, straight from Ottawa. Greta knew about this. I didn't. I do now. I set up automatic contributions from my pension. $2,500 per account every January, 8 years. I never talked about it, not at Christmas, not at birthday dinners, not on the phone. Greta told me something once that I took as gospel. She said, "Money you bring up at the table isn't generosity anymore, it's performance." So I stayed quiet. I sent the annual statements to my son's address in Oakville every December. 1 envelope, year-end balances on 3 accounts, and a note clipped to the front in my own handwriting. "If you have questions, call me." 8 years. 8 envelopes. He never called. I told myself that meant things were fine. In the trades you learn that no news is good news. If the job is holding, nobody calls. Silence means the connection is solid. I was wrong about that. I've been wrong about a lot of things in this life. My son is 40 years old. He manages operations for a property development company out of Burlington. He's good at it. He wears dress shirts and talks in meetings and has never, to my knowledge, held a pair of wire strippers. When he was a kid, he refused to come into the garage when I was working because he didn't like the smell of solder and machine oil. I used to laugh about that. I don't laugh about it now. He married my daughter-in-law 12 years ago. She runs a home staging business out of Oakville. She has a talent for making rooms look like places people want to live in. I'll give her that. She put her name on the door and believed in it completely. The problem with believing in something completely is that you don't always see when it starts bleeding. For years when I called, it was always we've decided, we think, we feel it would be best. I hadn't heard my son say I in a long time. My son had married a pronoun. The last time I drove out to Oakville for a family dinner, my daughter-in-law introduced me to her neighbor as the father-in-law from Hamilton. Not Kieran's dad, not the kid's grandpa. The father-in-law from Hamilton. Like a category, not a person. Piper was 6 then. She came into the kitchen while I was washing up after dinner. There are always dishes, and a man doing dishes doesn't have to hold a conversation. She looked up at me and said, "Mom, who's the old man?" My daughter-in-law called from the other room. "He's from Dad's side, sweetheart." I kept washing. I counted the cups. 11. I washed all 11 and dried them and put them away in cabinets that weren't mine. On my way out, I looked for the bookshelf I'd built for Zoe 3 years earlier. Custom fit to her bedroom wall. Cherry wood, adjustable shelves, 60 hours of my Saturday mornings. It wasn't in her room. It wasn't anywhere I could see in that house. I drove the QEW back to Hamilton with the radio off. Now let me tell you about the packages. Every year I sent each grandchild something chosen because of who they were. Zoe was studying photography at school, so I'd found her a proper film camera, cleaned it up myself, loaded a roll of black and white film in the case. Felix played AAA hockey and had been using a stick with a cracked shaft taped over, so I got him a new Bauer, strung it, had his name put on the shaft at the pro shop. Piper was 8 and obsessed with maps, so I found a vintage wooden puzzle of Canada, the kind with the provinces as separate pieces, refinished the box and wrote her name inside the lid. 3 packages, tape still sealed, red marker through all 3 names. I sat with those boxes on my kitchen table for a long time. Then I went to the filing cabinet in the spare room and pulled out the folder Greta had made before she died. Meticulous woman. Tabs on everything. Inside was a copy of each RESP application, my signature as subscriber, and on the witness line, in her handwriting, Greta Ann Callahan. Then I went to find the padded envelope. It had come in January and I'd put it on the kitchen counter. I'd glanced at it, seen forms, seen the little adhesive flags, and set it down. Greta was the one who read the fine print. After she died, I made myself a rule. I don't sign anything without my sister Phyllis sitting next to me. It had saved me from a bad investment in 2021 and I'd kept the rule. So the envelope had sat for 2 months. I pulled it out from under the pile on the counter and sat down and read it. On top was a sticky note. My daughter-in-law's handwriting, rounded, cheerful. Hey Morris, just some routine paperwork for the kids' accounts. Sign where the flags are. Thank you so much. There was a small drawing of a sun next to the exclamation point. I peeled the note off. The heading on the first page said RESP subscriber change form. I found the flags. 3 of them, pink, 1 per page, every single one marking the same line. New subscriber signature. I sat in my kitchen with the refrigerator humming, and I didn't move for 10 minutes. Then I called Phyllis. She answered on the second ring. She heard my voice and said, Morris, what are you holding right now? I read her the heading. She said, don't sign a thing, I'm coming Saturday. Phyllis drove out Saturday morning. She's 54, been a CPA for 25 years, and she drives like she's trying to make a connection at Pearson. She didn't take her coat off. She spread papers on my kitchen table. And RESP has a subscriber. That's the person who controls the account, who can withdraw funds, change the beneficiary, or close the plan entirely. I was the subscriber, 3 times over. If I signed that form, my daughter-in-law would become the subscriber. She could then collapse the accounts. She'd have to repay the government grant portion. The CESG doesn't stay with you when the plan is closed outside of education, but the rest, the contributions and the growth, she could pull out, pay some tax, and spend however she liked. I looked at the pink flags. How much? I asked. Phyllis opened her laptop and turned it around. Zoe's account, $62,000, Felix's, $41,000, Piper's, $28,000. $131,000. I looked at that number. It didn't feel like money. It felt like 8 years of January mornings when I got up before 6 and moved $2,500 out of my pension account before I did anything else. Then Phyllis said, Morris, how's the staging business doing? I said I assumed fine. Why? She turned the laptop back, typed for a minute, then turned it around again. A business registry filing and a lien notice. My daughter-in-law's staging company had a lien filed against it by a furniture supplier in Etobicoke, January 14th. The business had pulled out a HELOC 18 months earlier, home equity line of credit, against the house my son spent 11 years building equity in, to expand. New warehouse space in Mississauga, a second van, staff. The housing market slowed. The contracts dried up, 18 months in the red, and the mortgage payment had gone up nearly $900 a month. I did the arithmetic on the back of an old invoice, the HELOC, the lien in January, the subscriber change form arriving a month later. They don't hate me, I said. Phyllis shook her head. They need you to step aside, she said. Not out of your life, off the paperwork. Those are 2 different things. Only one of them requires them to be cruel to you. I let that sit. I'm going to stop here for a second. Because I know some of you are thinking what I was thinking at that kitchen table. Old man, why didn't you pick up the phone that Saturday and drive to Oakville and say something? If you were sitting there with $131,000 and a lien notice and a sticky note with the sun on it, would you have driven out that day, or would you have waited? I want to know. One word in the comments, now or wait, then hit like so I'm not talking to an empty room. I waited. I told Phyllis I wasn't signing anything. She asked if I was doing it out of spite. I said no. I said Greta opened these accounts for those children, and I'm not handing them to a furniture lien. Phyllis nodded. Then she told me something I didn't know. When Greta set up the accounts, she'd listed Phyllis's office address as the secondary contact. 8 years of statements had been going to 2 places, my son's house in Oakville and a filing cabinet in Mississauga. Phyllis had 8 years of duplicates, every statement still in order. I stood in that office with the snow coming down outside, and I understood something for the first time. I had proof of everything, and my daughter-in-law didn't know that. 3 weeks later, Zoe texted me from a number I didn't recognize. "Grandpa, it's me. I'm on a friend's phone. Did you send me something for Christmas?" I typed yes. "A camera, you didn't get it." The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, 4 times. Then, "Grandpa, I didn't know you sent us things. Mom said you weren't really in touch." I sat in my kitchen and looked at the 3 returned boxes on the table. I picked up my phone and took a photo of all 3 of them. The red marker, the crossed out names, the tape still sealed, and sent it without typing a single word. The dots went for 12 minutes. Then they stopped. Then, "Grandpa, I'm in the garage." Then, "There's a lot of stuff in here." She sent 10 photographs taken in the dark with the phone flash on. A tarp pulled back in the corner under it, Zoe's camera in its case, still wrapped, a flat box that was Felix's hockey stick, shipping label still on it, Piper's map puzzle, 3 bags I recognized from 2 Christmases ago still tied, a birthday card I'd sent Piper, envelope still sealed, the cherry shelf, dust on every surface, a paint can sitting on top of it. I put both hands flat on the kitchen table and stood there. Then Zoe sent one more message. "Grandpa, I used the school library computers to do homework because Mom said we couldn't afford a desk." I read that 3 times. I typed back 1 finger. "I built you a shelf for your room, cherry wood, 4 years ago." A long pause. "Then there's a shelf in here under the tarp. It has my name on the bottom." 2 days later, Felix called me. Not texted. Called. He said, "Grandpa, can I ask you something about my hockey stick?" I said yes. He said, "There's writing on the shaft. Under the Pro Shop sticker there's a name. Is that from you?" I said, "That's the one I sent you last Christmas." He said, "She told me Dad bought it at the hockey shop in Burlington." He was trying not to let his voice break. He's 14, and he thinks crying is for younger kids. I said, "You've got nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all. That stick is yours. It was always yours." He said, "Grandpa, can I keep it even if she gets mad?" I said, "It's got your name on it. Nobody can take your name off a thing." He called back 2 days later and told me he'd shown his Lynn mates at practice, told his coach. He said, "I told them my grandpa gave it to me." And then he said the thing I wasn't ready for. He said, "I'm going to show you something on Saturday." I didn't know what Saturday meant until my daughter-in-law called. The warmth was gone from her voice. She said I was manipulating her children. She said I was going behind her back to a 17-year-old. I put the phone on the counter on speaker because I wanted both hands free. 32 years of working near live panels will do that to a man. I said, "Your daughter texted me." I told her the truth. That's the whole thing. She said some other things, and then she said it. The sentence she'd been carrying and didn't mean to let out. She said, "I know there's money in those accounts. Zoe doesn't care about you, Morris. She cares about what you can pay for." I stood there in my kitchen in my socks. She'd just told me she knew. She'd been holding that number in her head the same way I carry wire gauge, automatic, running in the background, always present. She slipped. I said I'd noted what she said and I hung up. Zoe was applying to McMaster for engineering. The offer came in April. She texted me, "Grandpa, Mac gave me an offer." I printed the acceptance letter and put it on the fridge next to a photo of Greta. In May, the school runs a send-off gathering in the gymnasium for the graduating class, an afternoon thing. Families, teachers, guidance counselors. The financial aid counselor walks around with a folder because the provincial student loan and RESP paperwork deadlines hit in July, and this gathering is the last time she sees everyone in one room. I put on the jacket I wore to Greta's funeral, navy, single-breasted, pressed the night before. I got there 40 minutes early, sat in the back row against the wall, back row far right. That's where I always sit when I don't know whether I'm supposed to be somewhere. My son and daughter-in-law came in near the front. She had a scarf on. She scanned the room once the way people do. She saw me. She went completely still for about 3 seconds. Then she turned back and put her hand on my son's arm. When they called Zoe's name and she walked to the front, she stopped at the edge of the low stage and put one hand up to block the glare from the windows. She looked toward the back row. She found me. And she held her acceptance letter up and pointed it at me. 80 families turned around to see who she was pointing at. I didn't stand up. I put 2 fingers to my forehead. That was all. Afterward, the room opened into the hallway, and paper plates appeared from nowhere. Zoe came straight through the crowd. She still had her cap on. She stopped in front of me and held out a photograph. Black and white, high contrast, frost on a car window, sharp, taken with a film camera. She said, "I found it loaded in the case. I had it developed. That's the first one I took with it." I held that photograph and didn't say anything for a moment. Then the financial aid counselor came through. Her name was Miss DuPont. She had a folder under her arm, and she was moving efficiently the way people move when they have a July deadline. She found my daughter-in-law first. She said, "I need to get the subscriber signature on Zoe's RESP accounts to finalize the financial aid package for McMaster. The school needs it before July 15th. My daughter-in-law said, "I can sign that." Miss DuPont looked down at her folder. She flipped a page. She looked up. She said, "I'm sorry. You're listed as beneficiary administrator on one sub-account only. The subscriber of record is someone named Morris Callahan." My daughter-in-law didn't say anything. Miss DuPont looked out across the room, completely pleasant, completely without any idea of what she was doing. "Excuse me, is Morris Callahan here? I need the subscriber signature." The room went quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation in the ceiling. In the back row, an old electrician raised his hand. I walked through the middle of that gymnasium and signed where she showed me. Zoe's RESP account. $62,000 going to McMaster Engineering. Then I set the envelope I'd brought on the folding table. Inside were 8 year-end statements, sealed, postmarked December, each year from 2016 to 2023. Every one addressed to my son's house in Oakville. A note from Phyllis explained where they'd been found, in a filing box in the staging company's warehouse storage unit, recovered when the lien was enforced and the contents inventoried. My daughter-in-law had filed them, not thrown them out, filed them. I set the envelope in front of my son. He looked at it. He looked at me. I said quietly, 8 years of December statements you never called. I figured silence meant things were fine. His jaw moved. I said, "That part is on both of us." He picked up the envelope with both hands. He held it the way you hold something you haven't decided whether to open yet. Then his voice came out rough the way it does when something has been held too long. He said, "You never came to my games, Dad." The room heard it. I let it sit. I said, "Can I show you something?" I took out the notebook I keep. Small, black cover, spiral bound. I've kept one since I was 24. In the trade you write everything down because a measurement in your head is not the same as one on paper. I opened to the middle and turned it around. November 8th, 1999. Kieran's game versus Ancaster. He scored once. He looked for me in the stands. I was in the parking lot in work clothes because I'd come straight from a job, and I didn't want him to be embarrassed by the smell of machine oil in the bleachers. I didn't wave. November 22nd. Kieran's game. His team lost by 2. He didn't look for me this time. I think he stopped looking around November. 41 more lines after that. Every game, every score, every evening I stood at the edge of a parking lot or at the back of an arena because I thought a father who smelled like a job site was something a kid shouldn't have to explain to his friends. He never saw me. I was always there. My son took the notebook out of my hands. He held it with both thumbs pressed to the first entry, and then he sat down on the gymnasium chair behind him and put his face in his hands. 40 years old. crying the way a 12-year-old boy cries, all at once with no practice at it. I stood in the middle of that room and understood what I had built. Across 32 years of staying quiet, I had built a structure where love was something you carried alone and called dignity. I was wrong about that. The following Tuesday, I drove out to Phyllis's office and did 3 things, all of them legal and straightforward. I transferred Zoe's RESP into her own name. She turns 18 in August. Phyllis held it as trustee for the 8 weeks in between. Felix and Piper's accounts went into a formal education trust with Phyllis as trustee. The money flows directly to an accredited institution. It does not pass through a personal account on the way. I didn't take $1, not one. That money was never mine to keep. I was just the name on the paperwork. My daughter-in-law called in August. I could tell from her voice that the lien had been enforced. The warehouse was gone. And the house hadn't sold fast enough to cover what the HELOC had done to the equity. She said, "Morris, if you released even $20,000, just to get us through the fall." I said, "I can't do that." She said some other things, and then she surprised me. She said, "You are a cold man. You have always been a cold man." I said, "I know that's what it looks like from where you're standing." Then I said the thing I hadn't planned to say. I said, "If you need somewhere temporary while things get sorted, there are 2 rooms above my garage. I wired the whole thing myself. Heat works. No full kitchen, but there's a hot plate and a proper bathroom." She went quiet. I said no paperwork, no conditions. She didn't take it. 3 months later, my son called and asked if the offer still stood. Not for him and his wife. They'd separated in September. For him and the kids. The offer stood. He and the 3 kids moved into the space above my garage in November. It was tight. 3 kids and their father in 2 rooms and a bathroom. I put in a second baseboard heater, cleared the shelving on one wall, and didn't say a word about it. Zoe went to McMaster in September. I loaded the cherry shelf into my truck, the one that had been under the tarp, and we got it up 3 flights to her residence. She put her camera on the second shelf, and her acceptance letter in a frame on top. Felix still has the stick. He flips it over when new teammates ask where he got it. Piper calls me Grandpa now, not the other thing. It took her about 4 months to make the switch, and I never once corrected her, while she was finding her way there. My son came into the garage on a Saturday morning in February and asked if I could show him how to wire a light fixture. He said he was tired of calling electricians. I said, "Pull up that stool." It took him 2 hours to do a 40-minute job. He asked 12 questions. 3 of them were good ones. At the end, he looked at the fixture and said, "Dad, why didn't you just say something? All those years. Why didn't you just say, 'Kieran, I'm at your game tonight'?" I sat down on the work stool. I said, "Because your grandmother told me that a man who loves you and makes you watch him do it isn't loving you. He's making a point. And I believed that my whole life." I picked up the spiral notebook from the shelf. I said, "The problem is, you can believe something true and still be completely wrong about how to use it. Silence isn't dignity, it's just a space you left empty, and somebody else moved into it. That part is mine to own." He didn't say anything for a while. Then he picked up the wire strippers and looked at them. He said, "Show me how this works." So that's what we do now. Saturday mornings in the garage. He is a slow learner with his hands, and he has ruined more connections than I'd like to count, but he keeps showing up. I wrote today's line in the notebook before anyone else was awake. April 19th, 2026. Kieran, garage, replaced the kitchen fixture, 3rd try, got it clean, didn't quit. I put the rubber band back around it and set it on the shelf. People ask me whether I forgave him. Here's what I tell them. Forgiving isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending 8 years of December statements got where they were supposed to go. It isn't pretending my daughter-in-law drew a sun on a sticky note and meant anything good by it. Forgiving is turning the light on in the garage in the morning and leaving the door open and seeing whether somebody walks through. He walked through, late, but he walked through. I'll take late over never, every time.